Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, folks. Welcome to another episode of the Marketing Your Practice podcast, the podcast where I get to help chiropractors simplify the marketing and the mindset necessary so they can make more money, have more impact, and experience more joy in their practice. In today's episode, I'm going to take you through the scientific process that will help you grow your practice. In fact, I'm going to share with you the scientific process that will help you get pretty much anything, almost anything, you'll see as we start to dive into this as well. Now, before we get started, I want to have and share a little bit with you about mindset, positiveness, negativeness, optimism, pessimism, those kind of things there too. Now, if you've listened to the podcast for any time, you know that I'm a little skeptical around the woo. Now, when it comes to getting things in your life, having a positive mindset, being an optimist, won't guarantee that you will get there, okay? However, having a negative mindset and being a pessimist, can you be a pessimism? Being a pessimist will guarantee that you won't get there, okay? So the foundation of what I'm going to teach you at the moment really starts with the belief that you can do it. I really like the story of Mel Fisher. Mel Fisher was a treasure hunter. I've talked about him a little bit before on the podcast. He spent years looking for a treasure, and in the process, something that he thought was going to take a few months, I think it took 16 years for him to find it. He lost his son along the way and his daughter-in-law. Financially, it ruined him before he found billions of dollars worth of gold, that was. But he had three things. He thought that the treasure must be out there. He had a belief in him that the treasure must be out there. He had a belief in him that it would be worth it in the end. And he had a belief that I can do it. So I think this, if we're going to take you through, and I am going to take you through a scientific process to maybe the thought is that you want to grow your practice, maybe it's something else that you want. The first thing you've got to believe is that it's possible. Okay, I can actually do this. You then have to believe that it's worth it. Okay, and then you have to believe that you can do it. So, is it possible to grow a practice to 200, 300, 400, whatever it is that you want it to be, visits a week? You have to believe it's possible. You have to believe that all the effort and energy would be worth it. And you have to believe that you have the skills necessary. Now, devoid of all of those, what I'm going to teach you in this episode will be pointless. Okay, one of my favorite books of last year, I think it was last year, these years of recent pandemic years have kind of bled all into one. I noticed the other day I was putting 2020 on the date of everything. Confusing. One of my favorite books of recent is Marie Forleo's Everything is Figure-Outable. I love that as a life philosophy. I think if I could drop a belief into you, I'll imagine that you are like a piggy bank. You grab that coin, pop that coin in. That belief I could drop in you is that everything is figure-outable. That'd be a really great foundation for us to begin with. So what is this scientific process, Angus, that you're talking about? Let's jump into it. I think there are 12 steps that we're going to work our way through. The scientific process starts with a question, okay? And the question in this case, the one we might work our way through in this episode is, how do I grow my practice? Now, if you're listening to this and maybe you want to apply this to something else, then as each of these steps we work our way through, you can start thinking in your mind, what might your question be? Is it, how do I lose 10 kilos? How do I gain 10 kilos? How do I get that car I've always wanted? How do I get that relationship I've always wanted? But it begins with a question, okay? What is the question that you want? We're going to start with, how do I grow my practice? The next thing we get to do is we do some research, okay? Now, maybe that's reading some books. Maybe it's listening to a podcast like this one, other podcasts. Maybe it's getting some coaches or mentor, or maybe it's just sitting down having a chat with a bunch of your friends, talking with people who have done what you want to have done, okay? People who've grown their practice, at the level where you're wanting to get to. That's where it begins as well. Now, we'll talk about it in a moment because, actually, before I get into this, I want to address, there are three things, because I touched on this idea of, Mel Fisher's idea of, it must be worth it, I can do it, it's possible, all of those kind of things there too. For some of you, as you're thinking about this dream, as you're thinking about this outcome that you want to achieve, there are three other things that get in the way as well. I want to just touch on those beforehand, just to lay some foundation. And it might be that I don't have time, I don't have the money to invest in the mentors, Angus, as well. And I don't have the knowledge to do this as well. I want to address each of those quickly first before we go any further. The concept of I don't have time frustrates me a lot, because the most busy people in the world are the ones that are achieving the most. Of recent inside of community influence, I've spent a bunch of time really focusing on planning, and I just did a month's deep dive into a 30-day goal, how to be a finisher. Part of that is analyzing where we waste our time. If you feel like you don't have time, I want you to take a good hard look at what's going on. Now, I've got people I work with young families, multiple practices, and it astounds me what they get done. The way they get things done is they're just not wasting a lot of time. If it is important to you, you will find time. If someone came along to you right now and said that you have some nasty disease and the only cure is for you to sit still for 2 hours a day, you would find a way to do that. You'd stop screwing around on social media. You'd stop wasting time on Netflix. You'd begin to prioritize what's important for you. The scientific process to get whatever you want is helping you get the life that you want. Now, maybe that's growing your practice. Maybe it's something different. If you can't find the time, then it's just not important. What I want to give you with regards to this is get rid of the myth of I can't and just change it to I won't. I won'ts are totally okay, but when you tell yourself I can't, it's incredibly, it robs you of an enormous amount of power. It's not what makes you an extraordinary human being. It's not what allows you to express the best that this beautiful world put into you, okay? So the idea of time. The idea of money is much the same way. We can get access to, and again, money and knowledge go along together in some ways. So many things don't cost money. You're listening to this and hopefully I'm sharing 25 years of experience, hundreds of thousands of dollars of investment of my time in learning these things. You can do it for free, okay? This is part of my mission, is to share this stuff. I love helping people. My inner philosophy, if I just help enough other people get what they want, I'll get everything that I want. I learned that from Zig Ziglar, okay? That's my success philosophy deep inside there. Most of the things that you want to achieve in your life won't take money, okay? They will take time and they will take an investment of knowledge. So you might say, look, I want to grow my practice, Angus, but I don't know how. That's a lie too. Now, you don't have to know how. You don't have to know all of the steps. You just need to know the first step, okay? So if you're already thinking, I want to get my practice currently, I'm at 100 a week, and I really want to get to 250, but I don't know how to do it. Well, at the moment, all you need to know how to do is to get to 110. And I bet you know that. I bet you know the first step. You've probably heard me talk about in the podcast beforehand. I can literally drive from one side of Australia to the other in the dark, pitch dark, in the middle of the night there too. And all my headlights on my car need to see is for the 100, 150, maybe 200 meters in front of me. That's it. And I feel very comfortable traveling, at 100 kilometers an hour doing that, because I know that I'll be able to adapt, change direction, slow down if necessary, we go along the way. So the idea of time, I don't have the time, I don't have the money, I don't have the knowledge. These are really just fake excuses that we put up in front of us there too. Now, maybe what you realize from this is it's not that I don't have those things, I just don't want it, in which case, fantastic realization. We shouldn't be putting our time, our effort, our energy going after things that we don't really want in the first place. So once you get it into the won't basket, then something else will pop up that your heart is truly calling you for. I think that life's purpose is all about expansion. That's it. If I struggled for a long time thinking about what's the purpose of life, trying to get it really specific. But for me, I think it's expansion, growth, that continual evolution as me as a human being there too. When I look at new projects, will this have me expand? The answer is yes. I'm more likely to want to head down that path. Anyway, that's that off to the side. Let's get ourselves back into the scientific process of growing your practice, getting anything that you want. Remember, it started number one with asking a question. How do I grow my practice? Number two was, how do we do some research? Where do I start to find who has done this beforehand? Books are great. Seminars are great. Friends, many of our friends have done this beforehand. Sometimes it's worth, some of the fastest ways, if you can get the right coach and the right mentor, is to pay for it. We're paying for speed there as well. Now, after that, the next step that we want to do is we want to start to construct a hypothesis. How am I going to do this? And so maybe the hypothesis for you is that I'm going to grow my practice by increasing my retention. Rather than trying to attract more new people into me, my focus over this next 90 days is all about retention. And the vehicle that I'm going to use to increase that retention is I'm going to really double down on my reviews and re-exams. I'm going to make sure that every 12 visits, someone gets a re-exam and a review that refocuses them back on what the goal is, meets their needs there too, and keeps them on track. That's the process that you're going to go through. Now, when you're constructing this hypothesis as well, it's just this, okay? At this stage, you don't have to know it works. If you were guaranteed that you knew it would work, you'll probably be doing it in the past. You probably wouldn't need to do it. So there will be a level of uncertainty in there. So once we've constructed that hypothesis, the next thing is we want to do is we want to test the experiment. Now, depending on the experiment that you're running, this one here we're going to run for 90 days. Give yourself enough time. Often, when I see people wanting to achieve something new, we don't give ourselves enough time. You know, I've heard it said that we drastically overestimate what we can do in 1 year, but we underestimate what we can do in 10. I think there's a lot of truth inside of that too. But we're going to have this as a 90-day test that we're going to run. Okay, all of our patients, we're going to make sure they get a review every 12 visits and a re-exam to refocus them on their cares, remind them of the value, remind them of what the prize is as well. Now, this first phase in here, the ask a question, the do research, construct a hypothesis, test with an experiment before we actually get started here too. This is a part of what I refer to or has been taught to me as passive action, okay? Now, we love, human beings, passive action. I love passive action. Passive action feels good because we're learning new things. We're getting a dopamine hit. We're getting excited. We're telling ourselves, this is cool. I'm going to grow my practice. These re-exams are going to be fantastic. Everybody's going to be right back on track again. You're starting to think about the rewards that are coming at the other end there. The challenge with passive action, nothing happens with passive action. And we can get stuck inside of this. For those of you that are serial learners, for those of you that are buying courses and never opening them up, never implementing, this is passive action. Now, you can tell if it's passive action by one thing. Is there a risk of failure? Now, with learning new things and not implementing it, there is no risk of failure. That's why we love passive action, okay? Now, we want to move from passive action into massive action, actually doing things. And again, when it comes to massive action, we'll talk about that as we go through these other steps there too. The key identifier in here is there a risk of failure? We want to have that risk of failure. Otherwise, there's no chance of success going forwards. Now, after we've done our 90-day our experiment there as well, what we want to do is step number 5 is the procedure working? Now, really, when we get to this, there are really only a few different answers. It's really either a yes or no or maybe. So step number 6, if the procedure is working, then surprise, surprise, just keep doing it. Okay, that's, in many cases, it surprises me how many times I'm talking to somebody and it says, I used to do that. I go, how did it work for you? It used to work great. Why did you stop? I don't know. Things get in the way. We need to start to ingrain these as a part of what we do inside of the practice. We need to make sure that we have systems in place that keep us on track of this too. The next step, step number 7, is what if it's a no or a maybe? Because quite often, my experience when I try new things in the practice, like maybe implementing this, is the answer to begin with is more likely to be a maybe or a no than it is a yes. Now, no's are interesting and maybes are interesting too. We want to ask ourselves a few more questions before saying no and abandoning it, okay? We need to say, why maybe did it not work? You know, was there difficulty actually getting people scheduled for their re-exams? It's not that the re-exams didn't work, it's that the front desk couldn't get them scheduled. In which case, do I need to do some more work in around scheduling? What were the barriers for people coming along to the re-exams? Maybe you needed extra time for the re-exams and there was no time in your appointment book. But we need to ask ourselves why it didn't work. This is an important thing for us to do. Instead of just saying it didn't work and stopping it, why did it not work? So step number 7, when we're dealing with that no or that maybe, is asking ourselves why. And again, we're not going to abandon the whole idea of re-exams being our solution to growing our practice here as well. We're going to change the experiment. Do I need to do my re-exams in a different way? You know, could I go back to my mentors? Could I go back to my friends, my coaches, and ask for input? Could I have somebody film or record my re-exam? Maybe I could look at it and review myself or have somebody else review how I'm doing this. So we want to change the experiment. Maybe we want to roll around for another 90 days again, or maybe this time we think, look, let me change the experiment. I'm going to bring it for a shorter period here. Maybe it's 60 days and I'm going to see what happens. Now, step number 9, if it's still not working at this stage here as well, only now would I suggest that we analyze the data and maybe we draw some different conclusions. Maybe we look at it and think, maybe increasing my retention through my re-exams is not the solution. Maybe the problem started a little bit earlier on. Maybe the big part of the problem for me is actually in the way that I did my initial consultation and the report of findings, that by the time I got to visit 12, it was too late. That the reason that people had started care, I wasn't clear that we were working beyond just resolution of symptoms. I wasn't giving them a bigger picture. So on to step number 11. And step number 11 is that we create a new hypothesis. Okay, so at this stage here, we're going to go back and say, for the next 90 days, I'm going to work on my initial consultation and report of findings. What I feel my hypothesis is that I haven't laid the foundations for retention. And while the re-exams were good, what I needed to do is get some solid foundations. And then finally on to step number 12. We continue to repeat this process until we get the results that we want. Now this really from step number, as I go back through my numbers there, 4 onwards, 4 through 12, this is all part of massive action. It's a continual loop that we might need to run through time and time again there too. Most of us, myself included, particularly in the early days, we try something, we fail, we stop, okay? Or we try something, we fail, maybe we try again, and then we stop. Most of us will run one loop. Occasionally, the rare ones amongst us will run it twice, but that's about it. And yet we hear these stories of Thomas Edison trying tens of thousands of different tries before he could find out what the solution was for the light bulb. You know, we hear stories about Colonel Sanders that I think he was in his 60s and again, thousands of rejections before somebody took on his 11 secret herbs and spices. We see success all around us and the stories that have this repetition that needs to happen. Test, try again. And all of this, is only possible if we go right back to the start, if we have that belief, it's out there, okay? This practice at 250 a week is possible. It's something that actually exists and that going for it will be worth it, okay? The effort of running through this cycle again and again will be worth it. And then finally, that I can do this. This is why I started with that to begin with, that this positive mindset, this belief that everything is figure-outable, as the gorgeous Marie Forleo would talk about, it needs to come from that. And then when we run through these 12 steps, I want to share a final step with you about the concept of readiness, because it's another thing that often stands in the way of us. It says, look, Angus, I want to get started on this, but at the time I'm listening to this, it's kind of end of November, maybe. I'm not sure when this episode will come out there too. I'm going into Christmas. I'm not really ready at the moment. Or, there's some form of I'm not ready yet. This is another thing. What I found in my life is that for the big things, whether it be getting married, whether it be starting a business, whether it be having kids, I've never been ready. The idea of doing the thing is actually what gets us ready for us. Marriage is what prepares you for marriage. Having kids is what prepares you for having kids. If you're waiting until you feel ready to grow your practice, to lose that 10 kilos, to find that relationship there, you'll be waiting a long, long time. Readiness is not the important ingredient. Commitment is. If you're committed to getting the result, then the readiness follows after that, not the other way around there too. So there's 12 steps, a scientific process. It's the same process that is used across all different industries, whether it be trying to work out a new recipe at a restaurant, whether it be trying to design a new car, or whether it be you trying to grow your practice. Follow those 3 steps. 3 steps? 12 steps? Follow those 12 steps. Rinse and repeat. Watch and see what happens. Okay, that's it for today, folks. As always, thanks for all that you do. Keep saving lives. Your community, my community, needs you to step up, learn this stuff, and implement it. Until next time, have a great day. Bye. If you've enjoyed listening to this podcast, you have to come and check out my Community Influencer Program. It's my monthly coaching program where we take all this material and I'll work with you to help you apply it, implement it, and systemize it. The Community Influencer Group Coaching Program is designed to help you increase your practice income, impact, and enjoyment. Join me over at anguspyke.com/join. That's anguspyke.com/join. I'd love to see you there.